All right, well, hello. Hope you are all doing well. I know that these videos can kind of sometimes be a little awkward because we're not sitting there face to face. And, I do really value the face to face interaction. If there's, conversations that you want to have, you want to do a Google Hangout or a Skype or something like that, a Zoom, we can absolutely do that as we kind of near the completion of our course. It's crazy to think that we're here in the middle of Unit 6. We have a couple left and then we're done. So just great content. Again, I know this is a unique course. One, it's online. Two, the delivery model, the style, the fact that there's less students. But I really have just really enjoyed the things that you're sharing, the questions you're asking. Even our first paper, as you kind of reflected back on the strengths or the well-being assessment. And now, as we have our next paper coming up here, with the career and vocation and calling text that you've been reading, and I hope that you've really enjoyed that and kind of seen great value in connecting that to the overall work that you're doing in the career development space. So great work. Keep it up. And this week you have asked some really great questions, so I'm going to talk about some of those questions with you. First one I want to get at, I really like this week's content because I think it's so relevant, and I think it's something that even today I was talking with a student, and they're tangentially connected to my school, but I don't have oversight for some of the incoming content that we do, namely the assessments. And so I'm meeting with a student, and I asked them as they're kind of figuring out what's next. They're about to graduate with their degree. And I said, do you happen to know what your MBTI results are? And the student said, yes, I do. And they told me what they were. And I said, okay, great. Have you ever had anybody interpret those results for you? And they said, no, I haven't. So they listed them off, and they said what they were. And I said, oh, well, you probably, based upon at least your assessment results, your personality type, you probably do this a lot, and you're probably really hard on yourself, and you probably do this and this and this and this. And they said, yeah, I do all of those things. That's very accurate. And so that was able to give me a nice kind of a baseline, if you will, a framework out of which I could operate in talking with the student. So a couple of the questions that you asked, obviously, were about the topic of assessments, online and otherwise. And so I want to address some of those. So thanks for these really thoughtful questions that you did ask. Really quickly, it says, how should a counselor deal with a client that is not satisfied with the process of career counseling? What if the client is upset that there are so many assessments and what they perceive as not taking enough time to talk, essentially? It's a great question. I'm sure that much like in all other forms of counseling and therapy work you do, there's going to be people that just aren't pleased. And so, one of the things that we need to make sure that we're doing is we're being ethical and we have high integrity and, we're people of character that are delivering on what we say we will do. That we're upfront with our clients from the very beginning. This is what you should expect, and yada yada. They know what they're getting themselves into. So when I tell my clients that if they're going to do what we're signing up to do from a career coaching or career counseling perspective, I require 4 sessions, and it's going to take time. And so I'm meeting with a client right now, and we've been meeting, talking, I guess I could say, for the past month and a half. And by the time we've had our 4th meeting, it will probably have been a total of 2 months. Now, this is not typical, and I would say it's probably not ideal, but it's a long, drawn-out process. And so I've given this client a number of things to work on along this time frame that we've been working together. And so they had things to do. They've had some assessments to take. They've had some books to read. They've had some documents to work on, right? I asked them to give me a resume, and then ask them to give me some more in-depth content on their work history, chronologically speaking. I asked them to write a cover letter for a job they found they actually wanted to potentially apply for. And so I said, I'm going to work on that cover letter. It takes time. This is a time-intensive process. So if they think it's not what they are wanting, I think at the same time, you're the professional, and if you have done a good job of really explaining what to expect and how much time it's going to actually take, they might complain about it. But if you're doing what you said you would, and you're asking of them to do certain things, there's not a whole lot that we can do. This is a process, and I've been doing this now for over a decade. And so if someone says, I don't think this is right, I'd say, well, that's your choice, but you sought me out, you paid for these services because I've been doing this for a long time and you trusted that I knew what I was doing. And if you look at this track record that I have and you talk to previous clients, if they wanted to do that, you would hear from them that what I've done with them is exactly what I'm doing with you, and it's proved to be effective, right? So you're going to have some of those people who just aren't happy. And, I paid much money for this, or, this is what I thought it was going to be. Well, if we're upfront with them and we tell them exactly what it's going to cost and we tell them exactly what we're out to accomplish, I don't make promises. I'm not going to get you a job. I'm never out to get you a job. I'm out to help you understand yourself better and what it is that you want to get out of a job so that you actually know what jobs to apply for, and I can help you be prepared to do that. So I know it's kind of a hard, not maybe the clearest answer, but it's a hard question, and I think it's something that in many ways is handled on a case-by-case basis. Another one says, how should a counselor approach the subject of test results that the client, and I would say, remember, it's assessment results, because test means there's a right or wrong answer. Assessment results change the reality of that. So there is no right or wrong, there just is. But how would we approach the subject of the assignment, the assessment results that the client's not happy with? Would telling the client that the assessments are used for a baseline only take away the validity of the assessment? That's a great question. And let me just answer, I don't think that it would take the validity away at all. Now, when you think about something like the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, when it was first developed and founded, it was developed by a mother and a daughter who didn't have any psychological or psychometric training. So it was Myers-Briggs, right? So they just came up with this because they had been students of Carl Jung, okay? So they studied Jungian theory, and they liked it, so they came up with this assessment. It wasn't valid, okay? So they've since had PhDs come in and do the validity testing of this, and it's much more valid. Step 2 is much, much more valid than Step 1. I really like Step 2. It's much more involved. But at the same time, it is valid. But if a client says, I don't like this, well, you're not held to it, right? You don't have to, it doesn't define you. And so it's a baseline because it gives you an opportunity to have a conversation. And the more informed that you and I are in our understanding of these assessment results, and the better we're able to interpret them and give kind of explanation on the content, the more helpful we will be to help the clients become more comfortable with the assessments. Now, I will say, if you do simply the Step 1, some of the experts in Myers-Briggs would tell you if you don't like your results, then don't use them, right? So I've done this with numerous clients, and they've taken the assessment, and they've come back, and they've got a result of I. And they said, I don't like that. Well, the professionals would say, well, then don't utilize it, right? If it just doesn't describe you, then it doesn't describe you, and who knows, no one knows themselves better than themselves, right? So I think that reminding the client that it's and I shouldn't say just, but it's a baseline. It helps us to understand self. It doesn't define us. It's not gospel truth, right? It's not definitive. It just is. I think is helpful. And we can talk about that there is psychometric, data that backs up that this is very valid. And yet at the same time, people just are not going to, onions are good for you. That's fine. I don't like onions, right? It's obviously it's a different realm of discussion, but the idea there is kind of the same. So is there any truth in this? Okay, if there is, then let's take that truth. Let's pull that content out and look at what it means for you. If there's not, then let's move on and look at the other elements. I think there's always something that can be taken away from these assessments. The client's just going to decide what it is they want to take. But is it valid? Absolutely. Some are not, right? If you give them the free one, it's not going to be entirely valid. It's going to be somewhat accurate, but not entirely valid. So we want to make sure that in line with our desire to be full of integrity and character and so forth, that we're also utilizing assessments that are in fact proven to be valid. But reminding the client that this is simply a baseline to help us understand ourselves better so we can move forward with some different content and context to help us know more about self so we can make the best decisions in the future. It's a great question. Let's do another one here. I liked this one. Let's see. Are most of these assessments easily accessible to counselors, or do they have to be bought from a certain source? They are easily accessible, but because they have to be bought from a certain source. Okay, so like the strong interest inventory, or you took the RIASEC, the Holland Codes inventory, which is really, in its truest sense, it's the strong interest inventory. It is housed, if you will, by what used to be CPP Incorporated and is now the Myers-Briggs Company. Okay, so too is the Myers-Briggs type indicator. Again, it was formerly CPP Incorporated, and now it's the Myers-Briggs Company. So there's a couple different things you have to go through to become eligible and able to purchase, administer, and interpret these assessments. So you can go through a 4-day training that costs about $1,900, and you're certified as a Step 1 and Step 2 MBTI trained certified practitioner. There is also the ability for you to become what we'd call educationally eligible. Okay, educational eligibility. So you can purchase the assessments, and that's really helpful. I'm educationally eligible. Now I've done a number of trainings, and I'll talk all about this as we near the end of the class. But you do have to go through some form of training so you know what you're talking about, right? So your degree, the MA in clinical psychology, actually does make you educationally eligible and able to purchase, administer, and interpret the Myers-Briggs type indicator and all the other Myers-Briggs company assessments, which is a great little thing. But you probably don't want to do that unless you actually understand the content, right? So, and I'll share some other ways you can be trained. In fact, I'll probably send that this week, things to consider, especially if you go into certain realms. The one that I did my training through is one that's specifically for those that are involved in higher education, and it's the only eligible online training format for the Myers-Briggs type indicator and the strong interest inventory. But yeah, so there's lots of different ways you can do the kind of preparatory work for this, but if you want to actually, again, purchase, administer, and interpret, you do need to actually pay an annual fee to the Myers-Briggs Company so that you can purchase and then you can send out. So the fee you're paying is, I think it's about $200 per year. But for the Myers-Briggs type indicator and other assessments, there's actually, I think, 5 or 6 available in the suite of assessments. You can charge much more than the face value because you're doing the interpretation and all of that. So I'll share that with you. So they are easily accessible, but you do have to make sure that you have the right credentials, and then I mean easily accessible in that you can purchase, right? You can actually go on a website and have them. They're not accessible to a normal lay person, but they are for a practitioner that's either certified or they've been deemed educationally eligible. Okay. And then here's another question: would it be easier to first do an assessment in the beginning of a session to discover the certain information you need to know? When would you know the right time for an assessment rather than having a dialogue about it in counseling? Okay. I am not of the mindset that an assessment is right to be done at the beginning. So I go through a process. I go, what's up? What's so? What's possible? Let's go. So the what's up is the intake. The what's so is kind of some of these realities. So I'm looking at, as we do the intake, we have our first initial meeting. I ask them some questions. I give them some things to think about. I will then potentially offer up some assessments. Maybe I'll wait until the end, maybe I'll wait until the beginning, but I don't know exactly what the client needs, so I can't actually say this is what we need to do right off the bat. Okay, so I think a lot of it it requires a back and forth, right? One of the other questions was, do you have a kind of a go-to assessment that you use? And for me, I have a number of them because I need to be very informed on what they are, but then also be able to offer up the assessments that are right for each specific client. All right, the Myers-Briggs might be the best thing for one client. The Strengths Finder might be the best thing for another client, right? The Strong Interest Inventory for another client. Maybe the Well-Being Index might be another one for another client, or the Achieving Styles Inventory. So again, I want to be able to go in, be able to administer just a slew of assessments, but know my client well enough in this first initial meeting or two to then say, here's what I think is best for you. Will it hurt you to do them up front? No. But I think if you're looking at what's the most beneficial for the client, waiting a little bit, I think I would say would actually be the most beneficial for them. So you better understand who they are, what their needs are, and how you can help them get from point A to point B. So these are some great questions. I'm so grateful that you asked them. I hope my responses have been helpful. Of course, I'm always happy to talk more, willing to engage in email or on the phone or even in person if you're in the Claremont area. Would love to chat more with you. Let me know if there's more questions. Have a great rest of the unit, and we'll see you online.